The crisp, cool air of the Alps carried the scent of pine forests and melting glacier streams. In the gentle morning sunlight, the Mont Blanc Royal Resort stood like a castle amidst the majestic natural landscape. This was the perfect retreat for the wealthy seeking tranquility and luxury. In the most luxurious suite of the resort, Alexander Grant, the CEO of a leading global tech conglomerate, sat at a desk made of expensive walnut wood. His face, familiar from the covers of business magazines, was now contemplative and weary. His deep-set eyes mirrored the turmoil within his mind. Pressures from the board of directors, billion-dollar deals, and a high-profile divorce that had been the subject of relentless media gossip for the past year. Alexander was no longer a man who easily showed emotion. He had built a cold, impenetrable facade, keeping everyone at a distance. In another corner of the resort, Sophie Hart, a 24-year-old with soft brown hair and striking blue eyes, was busy with her tasks. Having grown up in a small rural village, Sophie had come here hoping to earn enough to pursue her dream of becoming an interior designer. She worked diligently, driven not just by duty but by a genuine passion for discovering beauty. The meticulously designed spaces within the resort often made her pause momentarily to admire them, drawing inspiration for the unfinished sketches she kept in her ever-present notebook. That morning, Sophie was assigned to clean the resort's most luxurious suite, the one where Alexander was staying. With years of experience, she knew to maintain a professional demeanor in any situation. She knocked lightly on the door, and when there was no response, she entered and began her work. Unexpectedly, Alexander emerged from the bedroom, his white shirt partially unbuttoned, revealing a glimpse of his toned physique. His piercing gaze locked onto Sophie, momentarily unsettling her, though she quickly composed herself. "Who are you?" His deep voice resonated, carrying a mix of weariness and irritation. "Apologies, sir. I'm the housekeeper. I thought the room was unoccupied," Sophie replied, her eyes fixed on the floor to avoid his intense stare. Alexander frowned slightly but said nothing more. Instead, he settled onto the sofa, picked up a newspaper, and continued reading, as if Sophie's presence was inconsequential. But Sophie wasn't one to fade into the background. While tidying up, she noticed a painting hanging askew on the wall and instinctively adjusted it. "This angle makes the space feel unbalanced," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else, unaware that Alexander had overheard her. "What did you say?" he asked, looking up, a hint of curiosity flickering in his eyes for the first time. "It's just, the painting should be aligned to complement the room's architectural lines," Sophie replied, her tone sincere but unflinching. Alexander allowed a faint smile to surface, something that had become rare for him lately. "You're interested in design?" "It's my dream," she said, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about her passion. For the first time in months, Alexander felt a small warmth seep into his otherwise cold and distant soul. There was something about this young woman, her honesty, intelligence, and pure passion, that he couldn't ignore. Though it was just a brief moment, that encounter planted a seed in Alexander's heart. Little did he know Sophie, the young woman from a tranquil village, would change his life in ways he could never have anticipated. Welcome to today's story. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to never miss out on meaningful stories like this one. Chapter 1. The Initial Bond. The cool afternoon at Mont Blanc Royal Resort brought sunlight dancing across the large glass windows, reflecting the majestic mountain scenery outside. Sophie was meticulously cleaning the items in Alexander Grant's suite, a space where every detail of the decor exuded luxury and elegance. Despite trying to remain calm, she couldn't shake the invisible pressure of being in the domain of someone as powerful as Alexander. As Sophie wiped the dust off a shelf near the window, she didn't notice a gold-plated antique vase precariously perched at the edge. While turning, her cleaning cloth accidentally snagged the vase's edge. Before she could react, it tumbled to the ground, shattering with a resounding crash. Sophie froze, her heart pounding. She knelt to pick up the shards, silently chastising herself for her carelessness. Before she could finish, Alexander entered the room. His sharp gaze swept over the scene, and Sophie realized there was no hiding what had happened. "What happened here?" Alexander asked, his deep voice resonating with authority. Sophie took a deep breath, clutching the cleaning cloth tightly in her trembling hands. I I accidentally broke the vase. I'm very sorry. It wasn't intentional. Instead of the anger she braced herself for, Alexander looked surprised. His piercing eyes studied her, as though trying to see through her honesty. That was a valuable antique, he said, his tone calm but serious. Why didn't you try to cover it up? Sophie raised her head, her eyes shining with sincerity. I thought it would be better to be honest and find a way to make amends than to lie. I deeply regret damaging your item. Her calm and graceful response caught Alexander off guard. Do you even know the value of that vase? He asked. Sophie swallowed nervously, unwilling to guess. Probably worth more than a year of my salary, she admitted, but I'm willing to work overtime to repay it. Alexander remained silent for a few moments before unexpectedly laughing. It was the first time Sophie had seen him smile, a gentle smile that momentarily softened his usually stern face. All right, you won't have to repay it, he said, but I do have a request. Sophie was taken aback. What kind of request, sir? You seem to have a good eye for aesthetics, he replied, a hint of amusement in his gaze. I've been considering redesigning some areas of the resort. Perhaps you could help me with a few ideas. The suggestion left Sophie stunned. Part of her felt unqualified for such an important task, but another part of her was thrilled at the opportunity to showcase her talent. She took a deep breath, thought for a moment, and nodded. I'll give it a try. In the days that followed, Sophie and Alexander began spending more time together, discussing ideas for renovating the resort. Sophie proposed small but creative suggestions, such as incorporating design elements that highlighted the natural beauty of the Alps or using eco-friendly materials. Alexander, who initially observed and assessed her from a distance, gradually became captivated by her enthusiasm and deep understanding of design. One afternoon, as they sat by the fireplace sketching ideas, Sophie asked curiously, "Why do you want to renovate this space? It already seems perfect." Alexander looked at her, his gaze distant for a moment. "Perfection is only on the surface," he said. "This place feels empty to me. I want to turn it into something meaningful, not just for me, but for everyone who comes here." Sophie realized that behind Alexander's cold and powerful exterior was a lonely man carrying many emotional wounds. He wasn't just aiming to build a luxurious resort. He was searching for something deeper, perhaps a connection he had long lost. "Have you ever had that before?" Sophie asked gently. Alexander fell silent, lost in thought. "Maybe, but I let it slip away," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. That conversation helped Sophie understand Alexander better, and he began to feel warmth from the young woman who was quietly reshaping his perspective. From discussing design, their conversations expanded to sharing stories about their lives, dreams, and fears. Sophie realized that despite being a powerful CEO, Alexander was just a man yearning to be understood and loved. In this budding connection, it seemed both of them had found something they didn't even know they were searching for. Chapter 2. The relationship deepens. That night, the sky above the Alps was like an enchanting painting. Thousands of stars sparkled across the dark canvas, and the moonlight draped the resort in a magical glow. Sophie stepped out onto the balcony after finishing her work, holding a cup of hot tea to enjoy a moment of tranquility after a long day. She hadn't expected to find Alexander already there, leaning against the railing, his gaze distant as he stared at the snow-covered peaks. "Mr. Grant," Sophie said, a bit startled, "I didn't think you'd be out here this late." Alexander turned to her, and for once the intensity in his usually stoic eyes softened. "I just couldn't sleep," he said, offering a faint smile, "and you don't need to call me Mr. anymore. We've worked together long enough to drop formalities, haven't we?" Sophie smiled but kept a polite distance. "Well, Alexander, would you like to talk?" Alexander was silent for a moment before nodding. He motioned for Sophie to join him in the chairs nearby. The cool breeze swept past them, but the atmosphere between them felt unexpectedly warm. "Do you know," Alexander began, his voice measured, "when the last time I sat under the stars like this was?" Sophie shook her head, curiosity lighting up her face. 5 years ago," he said, his tone carrying a mix of nostalgia and bitterness. "Back when I thought I had everything, a flourishing career, a wife I believed was my perfect partner. Then it all fell apart. She left, and with her, she took everything I cared about, including my faith in people. Sophie could feel the deep pain in Alexander's voice. Divorce is always a difficult wound to heal, she said softly, but it doesn't define who you are. Sometimes those scars can make us stronger. Alexander let out a bitter chuckle, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That's what I tell myself every day. But the loneliness, it's unbearable. In a world where everyone sees me as a cold, powerful CEO, very few remember that I'm just a man who also needs to be understood. Hesitant but empathetic, Sophie placed her hand gently on Alexander's, a small gesture, but one filled with meaning. I understand how that feels, she said, her voice tender. When I was young, my mother passed away early, and my father worked day and night to support me. There were times I felt invisible, as if the world never truly saw me. Alexander looked at Sophie, his gaze shedding its usual coldness. You're not invisible, Sophie, he said, his voice warm enough to make her heart skip a beat. You have a unique talent, resilience, and understanding that I rarely see in anyone. His words made Sophie blush, her heart fluttering with emotions she hadn't anticipated. They continued talking, sharing struggles at work, fears of not meeting expectations, and unfulfilled dreams. Sophie spoke about her aspiration to become an interior designer, transforming rigid spaces into places brimming with emotion and memories. For the first time in years, Alexander felt he could open up completely without holding anything back. As the night wore on, a comfortable silence enveloped them. Sophie stood ready to bid goodnight, but Alexander stopped her with a gentle request. Don't go just yet. Stay a little longer. Sophie hesitated, her heart racing, but eventually nodded. Just a little longer, she said, trying to keep her composure even as her pulse quickened. They moved inside the elegant suite, where the soft glow of the bedside lamps created a cozier ambiance. Sophie settled on the sofa by the window, and Alexander poured 2 glasses of red wine, handing her one. Sitting closer now, the silence between them transformed into an invisible thread that tied them together. Sophie, Alexander murmured, his voice almost a whisper, you make me feel something I thought I'd never feel again. Sophie looked up, her eyes meeting his. In that instant, her defenses melted away. And you make me believe that trusting someone again isn't as terrifying as I thought, she replied. Alexander leaned in, his eyes searching hers for consent. Sophie didn't respond with words, but the way her hand gently touched his face was all the answer he needed. He pulled her closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and filled with a fervent intensity. Time seemed to stand still, their pain and loneliness dissolved in the warmth of each other's arms. Sophie felt Alexander's sincerity and longing, while he found solace and hope in her presence. They were no longer CEO and employee, but 2 souls who had found each other amidst the chaos of their lives. As the first light of dawn streamed through the windows, Alexander gently brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face as she lay nestled against his chest, her breathing soft and even. A sense of peace washed over him, a feeling he hadn't thought he'd experience again. Sophie stirred slightly, smiling in her sleep, and Alexander knew that this night had been more than just a physical connection. It was the beginning of something deeper, more profound, and he wasn't ready to let it slip away. Chapter 3. Crisis and Turning Point. Sophie left the Mont Blanc Royal Resort early one morning, her heart heavy but resolute. She convinced herself it was for the best. The moments she shared with Alexander felt too perfect to be real, and she knew she couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Alexander belonged to a different world, one of power, wealth, and pressures she couldn't fully comprehend. Despite her love for working at the resort, Sophie was just a temporary employee trying to save enough to pursue her dream. She returned to the small town where she had grown up, determined to start over. However, just weeks after her return, she realized something was different. The fatigue, bouts of dizziness, and morning nausea became impossible to ignore. After a visit to the doctor, she received life-changing news. She was pregnant, and not with 1, but 2 children. The revelation left Sophie stunned. She sat in her small room for hours, staring at the pregnancy test and the ultrasound image. Part of her wanted to rush to Alexander and tell him he was going to be a father, but fear quickly took hold. What would he think? A man like Alexander, scarred from a high-profile divorce, might suspect her motives. He might believe she was using this as an opportunity to tie herself to him, to climb into a life she never dreamed of. These thoughts compelled Sophie to remain silent. She focused on stabilizing her life, taking a part-time job at a small children's store and saving every penny to prepare for the arrival of her twins. Meanwhile, Alexander returned to the city with an unshakable sense of emptiness. After the night he spent with Sophie, he felt he had rediscovered something long lost: warmth, trust, and a flicker of hope. But upon returning to the resort, he learned Sophie had left without a word. Her sudden disappearance left Alexander baffled. He couldn't understand why she had vanished so abruptly. He sought answers, asking the resort staff, but no one could provide any insight. For the first time in years, Alexander realized he had grown accustomed to someone's presence so much that their absence now felt like a profound loss. One afternoon, while strolling through a small town near the resort, Alexander entered a children's store to purchase a gift for his best friend's son. That's when he saw her. Sophie stood in the corner of the store, holding a small, delicate blanket, her expression conflicted as she glanced at the price tag. She didn't notice Alexander until his deep, familiar voice broke the silence. "Sophie," he said. Startled, Sophie turned, her heart racing as she faced his astonished gaze. "Alexander," she stammered, instinctively taking a step back as panic surged within her. But his eyes quickly fell to her midsection, slightly rounded despite the loose coat she wore. "You're pregnant?" Alexander asked, his voice rough, his expression shifting from shock to an emotion Sophie couldn't fully decipher: hurt, disappointment, but above all, concern. She lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you don't have to worry. This is my responsibility, and I don't expect anything from you." "Your responsibility?" Alexander interrupted, stepping closer. "Sophie, this isn't just about you. That child, those children, they're mine too. They're ours." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes as she looked at him. "I was afraid you'd think I was using you. I didn't want you to feel obligated to do anything for these children." Alexander shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "Sophie, the only thing I feel obligated to do is make sure you and those children are safe. I don't care about what anyone else might think or say. I care about you. I care about them, and I want to be here." Sophie was speechless, her emotions caught between relief and apprehension. For the first time in weeks, she felt a portion of the burden lift. But she also knew this was only the beginning. With the truth now out in the open, they had to face difficult decisions together, overcoming obstacles to build a future, not just for themselves, but for the two children whose lives were just beginning. Chapter 4. Alexander Faces Responsibility. Alexander stood silently by the large glass window in his luxurious apartment, the city lights reflecting on his face. The news of Sophie's twin pregnancy echoed in his mind, pulling him into a whirlwind of emotions. A man who had always been in control of every aspect of his life now found himself grappling with joy, anxiety, and the weight of responsibility. The next morning, Alexander appeared at Sophie's modest apartment. He carried a simple bouquet of white tulips and a large bag filled with books about pregnancy. When Sophie opened the door, her expression was a mixture of surprise and guarded composure. "We need to talk," he began, his tone calm yet resolute. Sophie placed her teacup on the table, avoiding his gaze. "Alexander, I know this is unexpected, but you don't have to do anything. I can take care of the children on my own." Her voice was steady, but Alexander could sense the worry hidden beneath her strong facade. He frowned, stepping closer. "Sophie, this isn't just about responsibility. I want to be here. I want to be part of our children's lives, and yours." She looked up, her bright eyes filled with hesitation. "I don't want you to feel obligated to do this. I don't want to be a burden to you, and I certainly don't want our children to be." Alexander sighed, his gaze softening. "Sophie, do you think I'm the kind of man who does things because I feel obligated? I'm doing this because I want to. You're the first person in years who's made me feel alive. I can't turn away from that. His words left Sophie momentarily speechless. She lowered her head, unsure of how to respond, but she didn't reject him. Alexander realized she needed time to process everything, so he decided to act rather than argue. The following day, he returned with a detailed plan, a schedule for prenatal care, ideas for renovating her apartment to make it suitable for raising children, and steps for planning their future together. "This isn't a suggestion," he said with a faint smile. "This is how I'm showing you I'm serious." Sophie couldn't help but laugh at his earnestness. "Do you always have to be in control of everything?" she teased, her tone lighter than before. "Only when it matters," he replied, his sincerity shining through. From that moment, their relationship began to shift. Alexander didn't just convince Sophie to let him help, he showed her that he genuinely wanted to do it for her and the children. Weekends became a time for shared errands as they shopped for baby supplies. During one visit to a baby store, Alexander stood perplexed before an aisle filled with diapers, holding 2 packages with different sizes and colors. "Why are there so many options?" he muttered, visibly overwhelmed. Sophie couldn't suppress her laughter, her gaze softening as she watched him. "Welcome to the world of parenting," she joked, and Alexander joined her in laughter. Moments like these revealed the human side of Alexander, the man who was earnestly trying to be a good father. But Alexander didn't stop at shopping trips. He suggested they attend prenatal classes together. Sophie initially resisted, feeling self-conscious about being there with him. However, Alexander's reasoning was hard to deny. "We're not just learning how to take care of babies," he said. "We're learning how to do it together." In class, Alexander surprised Sophie with his attentiveness and dedication. He took meticulous notes, asked detailed questions, and even practiced diapering on an oversized doll with comical seriousness. "You're very committed," Sophie quipped, watching him struggle to wrap a cloth diaper. "Wait until we practice with the real ones," Alexander replied with a grin. The classes became more than just a learning experience. They became a chance for deeper connection. After each session, they would often take walks in the nearby park, sharing their dreams, fears, and past. These long conversations helped them understand each other on a profound level. One evening, after dropping Sophie off at her apartment, Alexander paused at her door. He took her hand, his gaze serious but filled with emotion. "Sophie, I need you to know that I'm not here out of obligation. I want us to do this together, not because our children need me, but because I need you." Sophie looked into his eyes, feeling the weight of his words. She didn't reply immediately, but her gaze said everything. In that moment, they were no longer 2 people from different worlds, but 2 kindred souls ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Alexander's determination and Sophie's growing trust, they were ready to embark on a new journey, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future, not just for their children, but for themselves as well. Chapter 5. Pressure from Society. News of the relationship between Alexander Grant and Sophie Hart spread like wildfire when a photo of them at a prenatal class was leaked. In the picture, Alexander was gently helping Sophie step through a doorway, his gaze full of care, while her arms lovingly cradled her rounded belly, signaling the imminent arrival of their twins. Within hours, major headlines exploded with sensational titles such as "Powerful CEO Falls for Commoner," "Truth or Scheme," "Alexander Grant's Unexpected Romance," and "The Woman Who Shattered a CEO's World." Meanwhile, at the Grant Technologies headquarters, Alexander walked into the boardroom with a steely determination. Around the table, members of the board exchanged tense glances, some openly disapproving, others discreetly observing him. Brighton, one of the senior members, was the first to speak, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Alexander, we've tried to stay patient, but this has gone too far. The media is targeting the company, shareholders are uneasy, and we need an explanation. A CEO of your stature cannot let his personal life tarnish the company's reputation." Alexander listened, his face a mask of calm. Rising from his chair, he spoke with measured precision, each word cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "My personal life has not impacted the company's performance. We've met every revenue target, The stock value hasn't dropped, and our projects are on schedule. I fail to see why this warrants discussion." A sharper voice chimed in from the end of the table. "But a relationship with a former employee? Don't you think this invites scrutiny of your professionalism, especially when Sophie Hart is not from your social class?" Alexander's eyes turned icy as he locked onto the speaker. "I will not tolerate anyone here insulting Sophie. She hasn't manipulated me, and our relationship is no one's concern in this room. If anyone has an issue, they are welcome to vacate their seat immediately." Silence hung heavy in the room, the ticking of the clock the only sound. A few members lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze, while others appeared hesitant. Alexander knew he had cornered the board, but he didn't care. To him, Sophie and the twins were all that mattered. Elsewhere in the city, Sophie sat in front of her computer, scrolling through harsh comments about herself. Articles labeled her as a gold digger, someone exploiting Alexander to climb the social ladder. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing her self-worth. She didn't want to be a burden to him. After everything, the last thing Alexander needed was more trouble brought by her presence. Packing her small apartment, Sophie tried to suppress the pain in her heart. But as she zipped up her suitcase, a knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, there stood Alexander, his face etched with worry. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes darting to the open suitcase. "I think it's best if I leave," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to cause you more problems. I don't belong in your world, Alexander. I'm just a burden." Alexander stepped inside, gently taking her hands in his. "Sophie, do you think I care about those meaningless words? You and the babies are everything to me. I won't let anyone or anything hurt you." Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at him. "But you'll lose everything. The board, the shareholders, your friends. They're all against us." Alexander tilted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "If they can't accept you, then I don't need them. You belong with me, Sophie, and I'll do everything to protect our family." The determination in his voice broke through her doubts. Though her heart was still heavy with worry, she couldn't deny Alexander's love for her. He wasn't doing this out of obligation. He truly saw her as an inseparable part of his life. The next day, Alexander held a press conference to address the public directly. Standing before rows of cameras and reporters, he declared with unwavering confidence, "I want to make it clear that Sophie Hart is not using me. She is the woman I love, the mother of my children, and the person I intend to spend my life with. My personal life does not affect my ability to lead or the success of this company." The statement sparked a media frenzy, but it also garnered public empathy. Critics began reconsidering their harsh views, while supporters of their love story rallied behind them. That evening, Alexander took Sophie out to dinner at a small, quiet restaurant, away from the flashing lights and prying eyes. Holding her hand across the table, his gaze was filled with warmth. "We've weathered the storm," he said in his deep, calming voice. "From now on, I won't let anyone or anything hurt you again." Sophie smiled, feeling the strength in his words. She knew that challenges still lay ahead, but together they could overcome anything. Their love, forged through trials and tribulations, had become unbreakable. Are you still following their story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Chapter 6. A New Beginning for Happiness. Under the gentle afternoon sunlight, the Mont Blanc Royal Resort, nestled amidst the Alps, looked more vibrant than ever. Wildflowers bloomed along the banks of a crystal-clear stream that babbled through the valley. The crisp air, scented with grass and pine, brought a sense of calm to the distinguished guests attending a special event hosted by Alexander. It wasn't merely a lavish gathering, but a momentous occasion where Alexander publicly declared his love for Sophie, the woman who had forever changed his life. Sophie arrived at the resort, her steps tentative. She wore a pale blue dress that hugged her soft curves, accentuating her rounded belly, a testament to the twins soon to join their lives. From across the room, Alexander's eyes lit up as he spotted her. He strode confidently through the crowd, taking her hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world, drawing all eyes to them. Whispers rippled through the guests, but Alexander remained unshaken. His voice carried through the room, firm and resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen, today I wish to introduce someone special. Sophie Hart is not only the woman I love, but also the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. We are expecting two little angels, and I couldn't be happier to share this news with all of you." Applause filled the room, but murmurs of skepticism lingered in some corners. From within the crowd, Eleanor Grant, Alexander's formidable mother, emerged with a stern expression. As a woman of power and tradition, Eleanor was accustomed to the rigid expectations of high society and had never met Sophie before. "Alexander," Eleanor's voice carried an edge of disapproval, "are you certain this is the right choice? Can someone like her shoulder the responsibilities of our family?" Sophie froze, her hands trembling slightly, but Alexander, unwavering, tightened his hold on her hand and looked directly at his mother. "Mother, Sophie is not only a strong woman, but also the person who has shown me that love and sincerity are what truly matter. You'll see. She is not just part of this family, but its very heart." Eleanor frowned, her sharp gaze now tinged with curiosity. Sophie bowed her head slightly and spoke with a steady voice. "Mrs. Grant, I know I'm not perfect, nor am I what you might have wished for, but I love Alexander, and I'll do everything to be worthy of his love." The sincerity in Sophie's words left Eleanor momentarily unsettled. Slowly, the sharpness in her expression softened. "We'll see," she said in a measured tone. "Time will prove your words." As weeks passed, Sophie and Alexander prepared for the arrival of their twins. In the final days of her pregnancy, Alexander was always by her side, helping her through the fatigue and anxiety. He spent hours decorating the nursery, carefully choosing each tiny piece of furniture and decoration. Sophie felt his unwavering care and dedication, which deepened her love and trust in him. The day of the twins' birth arrived sooner than expected. On a snowy winter night, Sophie was gripped by intense contractions, signaling the moment had come. Alexander rushed her to the hospital, never letting go of her hand. His soft words of encouragement kept her grounded through the labor. When the first cry rang out, a healthy baby boy was placed in Alexander's arms. Tears glistened in his eyes as he gazed at the tiny, perfect face of his son. "My boy," he whispered, his hands trembling as he held his child for the first time. Moments later, Sophie gave birth to a beautiful baby girl with large, bright eyes. The doctor gently handed her to Sophie, and a wave of joy washed over her as she beheld her daughter's delicate features. Alexander leaned down, kissed Sophie's forehead, and whispered, "You did so well. You've given me the perfect family." In the warm glow of the hospital room, Eleanor appeared unexpectedly. She watched as Alexander lovingly tended to Sophie and their newborns, her stern demeanor giving way to a rare smile. When she finally approached the twins, she chuckled softly and said, "They're wonderful, Sophie. You've done an excellent job." Sophie looked up, her eyes red from tears but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling. Eleanor placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder, her gaze genuine for the first time. "You are part of this family now. Let's build a beautiful future for these children together." That night, as the snow outside ceased, Alexander embraced Sophie and the twins. Their little family, having weathered so many storms, was now enveloped in warmth and happiness. Sophie looked up at Alexander and softly said, "Thank you for always believing in me." Alexander smiled, gently kissing her forehead. "No, thank you for showing me that family is what truly matters." Outside, the glimmering light of the stars reflected through the window, heralding a new beginning full of hope for their little family. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. 1 year later, the lives of Sophie and Alexander had entered a new chapter. Sophie successfully completed her interior design course and opened a small studio specializing in creating warm, creative spaces. Alexander, after much contemplation, decided to reduce his workload at the corporation, allowing him to spend more time with his family. Every morning, Alexander took Lucas and Emma to the park, while Sophie focused on her work at the studio. In the afternoons, the family would gather to decorate their home together, from selecting room colors to arranging the drawings Lucas and Emma created. Their house in the Alps, where their love first blossomed, remained their favorite retreat, a place where they could escape the city and admire the breathtaking mountain scenery. Alexander continually supported Sophie, helping her build a network of clients and organize events for her studio. In return, Sophie taught Alexander how to balance work and family life, something he had never managed before. One summer evening, as the family sat together on their porch, Alexander watched Lucas and Emma playing on the grass. He smiled and took Sophie's hand. "I never thought I would have a life like this," he said, his voice gentle but full of emotion. "You and the kids are the best thing that ever happened to me." Sophie rested her head on his shoulder, returning his smile. "We've created this together, and I know we have many more journeys ahead of us." Their cozy home in the Alps became a symbol of love, companionship, and the belief that true happiness lies in the simplest things: family and unconditional love. The story of Alexander and Sophie comes to a close, but it leaves us with a profound reminder. Love and empathy can overcome all barriers, from social status to the scars of the past. When faced with responsibility and pressure, sincerity and understanding provide a solid foundation for building a relationship. Happiness is not found in perfection, but in overcoming challenges together, creating a family and pursuing shared dreams. Ultimately, commitment and trust will light the way, helping each person discover the true value of love and life. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Let us know your thoughts on this story in the comments below. What type of stories would you like to hear next? Don't forget to like, share this story.